Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In his essay on Solitude, Michel de Montaigne is going to talk about what we might frame as a particular situation or era of solitude where it becomes very important, and that is in retirement, or as he's going to call it, retreat. And it doesn't mean completely disconnecting from the entire world, but it does mean, starting to narrow your scope of activities. And he's going to start this by saying, we've lived quite long enough for others, for society, for all the people that we've got connections to or relations with and duties, obligations towards. And he says that let us live at least this last portion of life for ourselves. Let us bring our thoughts and reflections back to ourselves and to our own well-being. So what does that mean? Well, a lot of people think, I just quit working and I go home and now I got a lot of time to engage in my hobbies or sit and watch TV. And they don't put a lot of thought into their retirement or retreat. And Montaigne says, well, that's kind of a mistake. Why? Well, he says, preparing securely for our own withdrawal is no light matter. It gives us enough trouble without introducing other concerns. And since we have the opportunity to do so, he says, since God grants this to us, let's actually prepare for it. Let's pack up our bags and take leave of our company in good time. Even more important, let's disentangle ourselves from the traps which do two things. They pledge us to other things, and in doing so, distance us from ourselves. We don't want to go into retirement and then just lose ourselves in a whole bunch of other things. We want to get to know who we ourselves actually are. And he's got a really interesting metaphor for this. He says, we must unknot these bonds, and from this day forth, we can love this or that thing. It's not like we have to stop loving or liking things, but we'll marry ourselves. And he uses the word ipose, right? Or actually, espose, to be the spouse of. And he's going to say, let the rest be ours, but not so glued and joined to us that it cannot be pulled off without tearing away a piece of ourselves, skin and all. So you can do your hobbies, right? You can take your walks. You can have your pets or companions. You can do all these sorts of things. Don't make that so absolutely central to your identity that if you lose that, you're losing a part of yourself. And so he says the greatest thing in the world is to know how to live to or in relation to yourself. And he says this is a time that offers a certain opportunity. Why? Because we can't contribute anything to society. Now, of course, yes, you can, even if you're just sweeping the floor, that's a good thing that you're doing. The guy who goes to the cat shelter, this is kind of a famous thing here in Wisconsin, and sits on the chair with the cats several times a week and falls asleep and lets the cats come and nap on him. He's doing something, right? He is accomplishing something. But a lot of the time when we're getting older, we can't actually do quite as much. He says that a man with nothing to lend should refrain from borrowing. Our powers are failing. So what should we do? Let's draw them in and keep them within ourselves. And he says, what we want to do is turn around what's translated here as the duties of love and fellowship, but it's actually better translated as duties of companionship and friendship, amitié, which could be also love, right? We should take the duties that we have of companionship and fellowship and friendship that we engage with other people in and turn them in on ourselves. We should be companions to ourselves. We should be friends to ourselves. If we haven't been in the past, now is the time to actually do that. And if that means that you have to get to know yourself a lot better in order to be able to do that, well, now you actually have the time to do that. And he goes on to talk about another thing as well. He takes it for granted that as you age, you're going to become what he calls a useless encumbrance, importunate to others. Now, let's look at each of those terms in turn. Useless. Yes, you probably don't have a hell of a lot of usefulness for younger people. I mean, some of them perhaps are earning their living by taking care of you. They could learn valuable things from you if they're interested in learning them. You might do mentoring or stuff like that. But in a lot of respects, you don't have as much usefulness as you did before. This is something that's very hard for a lot of people to face up to in retirement, right? An encumbrance. Yes, an encumbrance is something that somebody else has to carry, put up with, something that's in their way, right? I've got to go see Grandpa tonight. I can't hang out with these people. Well, that's kind of an encumbrance for younger people, right? And importunate. So this is a term, to importune is to beg, to ask for, and to do so in a way that other people don't like to say no to because they feel bad about that. And that is indeed what happens with a lot of older people. So he says, listen, you're probably going to be like this to some people, maybe your family members, in Montaigne's case, some of his servants, because he's in a noble family that actually has some. I mean, it could be all sorts of different kinds of people. The barista who you want to chat with a little bit, and they're like, hey, I got to make some coffee here, but they'll listen to you for a bit. You don't have to be an encumbrance or useless or importunate to your own self. So you notice again this motif of turning inward, right? And he says, you can pamper yourself, you can cherish yourself, that's fine, what we call self-care. But above all, what you need to do is, it's translated as control yourself, se regent, rule over yourself, be in charge of yourself, respecting and fearing your reason and conscience. So, yeah, you can indulge yourself, but you need to be in charge. You can't just let the TV tell you what to do, or telemarketers, or somebody else. You need to actually stay on top of things as well as you can. And he says that, you need to respect reason and conscience. Why? So that you won't stumble in their presence without shame. And he's going to go on and then say, for some people, this is easier than others. What are the precepts about retirement? Some people can listen to that counsel more easily. Montaigne says, I'm one of those people. Why? So he says that Some hold on to things slackly and weakly. Their will and emotions are kind of choosy, accepting neither slavery nor employment easily. I'm this way both by nature and conviction. They will have an easier time with this than those busy, active minds, which welcome everything with open arms, which take on everything, get carried away about everything, and which are always giving themselves, offering themselves, putting themselves forward. Why is that a problem? He says, well, whenever good things happen to come to us from outside, we should take those on, but we shouldn't be so engaged in trying to seek them out. And here he's going to tell us we want to avoid extremes. So not everything is going to be as pleasurable or pleasant for us as it was when we were younger. Montaigne will write later on about, for example, sexual life, right? And he'll say, this is in a much later essay, you know, when I was young, I was pretty driven by sexual desire, and, you know, I had my share of dalliances and seductions. Now that I'm old, that appetite isn't as strong. But if it were, I'd probably be doing the same thing. You know, so long as you can actually enjoy it, it's okay to keep doing it. Same thing with eating and drinking, you know, quite notably, as you age, you lose some of your sensation. You might not enjoy everything to the same extent. Even intellectual pursuits, if your head is fuzzy a lot of the time, it's harder to read books. I mean, your eyes have a harder time reading them. They can be read aloud to you. But while you have these pleasures, well, use them. It would be silly to simply say, it's no good, I throw it all away, right? Take what remains pleasurable, but don't use pleasures as if they are the basis for your happiness, he says. They are no such thing. Neither reason nor nature will have them so. So we don't want to make our happiness a slave in the power of others. So that's one good middle course. Don't reject the pleasures, but don't also become a pleasure seeker. But don't go to the extreme of saying, I'm going to be a tough guy and I'm going to deprive myself of the good things that are in my grasp. You know, you don't need to sleep rough. That means sleeping outside, poking out your own eyes, chucking your wealth into rivers, going about looking for pain. He says, well, this is stupid. This is actually virtue taken to excess, which means that at a certain degree it stops being virtuous and starts becoming vicious instead, right? He says, I have enough to do without going so far as to reject all these things. When fortune favors me, it's enough to prepare for her disfavor, picturing future ills and comfort to the extent that my imagination can run that far, so long as, just as we train ourselves in jousts and tournaments. I don't need to, sleep on the floor, take cold showers, starve myself or anything like that. He actually says, if you're intelligent enough and you've got a strong enough mind, you can use reason to produce the same effects as habit would for facing the things that we typically are worried about, that we fear. Death, we're all going to die, right? Poverty, possible for people in old age, right? As their income, as their savings run out, as they run through their resources. Contempt, big problem for older people, right? People stop paying attention to you or caring about what you think. Sickness, well, that's another one that comes up as well. We could add to that pain or all sorts of other things. So you can use your reason to think about, well, what would I do in this situation? How would I face that? The last thing that he talks about in this discussion of solitude in retirement is what you're going to spend your time on, your occupation. He says that we don't want it to be toilsome or painful. Otherwise, why did we seek out that leisure, right? We may as well be working or something like that. And he also says it's going to depend on each person's individual taste. So what works for me might not work for you. What worked for Montaigne won't work for everybody else. He says, my taste is quite unsuited to managing my estates. That's not what I'm into. Other people really love doing that crap, right? They like micromanaging the servants and tallying up accounts. Montaigne, he's not into that, right? He says, a variation of that would be gardening. A lot of people do that. He says that, Xenophon attributes that to Cyrus the Great. And he also talks about two other things, one of which, well, actually both of which he engages in, but not quite for the same reason. He says that reading can be, an excellent thing to do, and writing. Now, our reasons for writing can vary considerably, and we'll look at, the motivations behind the activities in one's retirement in just a bit. He says that Pliny the Younger gave this advice to his friend Cornelius Rufus. I counsel you in that ample and thriving retreat of yours to hand degrading and abject care of your estates over to your employ. Devote yourself to the study of letters so as to derive from it something totally your own. By that, he means a good reputation, his humor being similar to Cicero's, who said that he wanted to use his retreat essentially from politics to gain life everlasting through his writings. Okay, so Cicero wanted glory. Now, Cicero had some other things he wanted to do. Take Greek philosophy, show it can be done in Latin. It wasn't just, glory seeking or anything like that. But Montaigne is going to say, this is your time, right? Why not actually get something for yourself? You don't need to be necessarily writing for others or thinking for others. Why not do something that's just yours, right? And then the last one that he talks about, a lot of people in his time are still doing, religious devotion. It says, those who seek solitude for devotion's sake, filling their minds with the certainty of God's promises for the life to come, that is sane and appropriate. Their objective is God, infinite in goodness and power. The soul can find there matters to slake her desires in perfect freedom. Pains and afflictions are profitable for them, being used to acquire eternal healing and joy. Death is welcome as passing over to that perfect state, right? Their carnal appetites are rejected and lulled asleep. Only this end, another life, blessedly immortal, genuinely merits our renunciation of the comforts and sweetnesses of ours. And he says, whoever can, in reality and constancy, set their soul afire with the fire of this lively faith and hope, builds in his solitude a life of choicest pleasures beyond any other mode of life. What's interesting, why doesn't Montaigne do that? That's not his thing. He is not among those people who can do that, but he seems to be willing to recognize that that's a possibility for others. So what we get here is a lot of reflections and even, we could say, wisdom about what solitude would look like in retreat or retirement, going in by yourself with other people, not withdrawing from the world totally, but certainly disentangling yourself from a lot of it so that not so you can completely free yourself and then that's it, but so you can be a friend of yourself and face your inevitable demise in some sort of way that makes sense for you.